Welcome all. It might be that this is your first time with us because you have Googled Othello literature analysis or A-level preparation. But if it's your first time here, be aware that this is episode 9 and that the preceding episodes take you through socio-historic context for objective 3, other critics for objective 5, and close language analysis and thematic arguments throughout episodes 2 to episode 7. Here, we're delving into revision and pulling all of those things together for integrated exam preparation. Please hit like, subscribe, hit the notification bell for forthcoming episodes on student examples of exam responses. The first easy way that you can prep for the exam is to watch a production. Don't fool yourself into lazily thinking that that's all you need to do, but it is a good way of consolidating your knowledge. I've previously recommended the RSC Iqbal Khan production, which is available on digitaltheatre.com, and you can get for free on a 7-day first bit of trial before it becomes a $9.99 subscription, or you can do a 3-day initial rental of it for $7.99. Watch a production. Alternatively, ntathome.com, the National Theatre production, is available, albeit I think that's an upfront $7.99 payment. You probably could listen to the play via audible.com for an initial first freebie, or perhaps parents and guardians have Amazon Prime and that's part of their package anyway. Watch a production. Not just the film. Although the film's great, do that too. Watch a stage production. It's no good at all separating the assessment objectives. You've got to integrate them all together. AO1, AO2, AO3 and AO5, AO4 isn't included because this isn't a comparative question, need to be integrated together for the best possible response. So, return to themes for your AO1 argument, anticipating what might come up in a question, and imagery for your AO2 analysis of how imagery maps onto recurrent patterns of motifs that show those themes. Jealousy, reputation, lies and deceit versus justice, loyalty versus disloyalty, ambition, trust versus betrayal, manipulation, race and racism, sexuality and sympathy are not an exhaustive list. Envy ought to be in there. Love, lust ought to be in there, as well as a great many other possible things. Honour was a question that came up recently, which I suppose links to trust and betrayal, etc., loyalty, that I hadn't anticipated. Imagery, hell, the devil, the diabolical, heaven, animals, the bestial, with both sexual implications and the idea of not ascending to heaven. Black and white, light and dark, medicine and poisoning, money, birth, plants, insiders and outsiders, eating, physical pain, violence, blood, jewels, sexual functions, the sea, warfare, battle, conflict. Again, that is not an exhaustive list, but that should be already with you as your A3 grid of key quotations that you are going to be memorising along with your critical quotes. So you've opened your exam paper and you've been confronted with a choice of 2 questions. One is a character study, the other is thematic. I tend to favour the thematic. Once you've got that, you have already set your agenda in preparation of themes for AO1 with your revision. You've already set your AO2 agenda of key quotations. If you've done that well, any number of themes and thematic key quotations will map onto any number of thematic questions, because some of these themes are synonymous with others. Once you've got that AO1 and 2 foundation, you must ensure that AO3 and AO5 are also analytically integrated into your argument. They are the best answers, not treating each thing as separate. For just some examples of ways that you need to avoid generically and naively dismissing things from a contemporary 20th century, 21st century view as racist or sexist, we need to look at the nuances of the lens through which the play was seen at the time and received by critics along the way. Somebody of black, African, Barbary, or African Mediterranean coast, Moorish descent would have been totally alien in Jacobean and Elizabethan England, apart from as a rare performing slave. Besides anybody of Arabic, slightly lighter coloured descent at all, until after the Second World War. It's important not to simply make a sweeping generalisation that Shakespeare's England was racist. I'm conscious that I don't want to come over as racist by saying things like slightly lighter coloured, but we need to think about the distinctions that would have been so alien and unusual to an Elizabethan or Jacobean. At this time, outward appearance equated to morality of the soul and nobility of character and personality. Noble birth and appearance equated to good morals, not, as Iago proves the exception, being deceitful. White meant Christian. Black would have been associated with the non-Christian world of the Islamic infidels, being evil. In the case of somebody black, witchcraft, or being lascivious, excessively sexual in libido. In the medieval chain of being, God, angel, king, man, woman, animal, vegetable, mineral, and so on. Black people were from the non-Christian world unless adopted into conversion to Christianity. So, descending through wrongdoing to a bestial level doesn't allow one to ascend to heaven, just as being lacking Christianity would not allow such a thing. Other useful analytical, or rather contextual concepts to analytically integrate would be the concept of the cuckold, the concept of a man growing horns to publicly shame him for having not sexually satisfied his unfaithful, promiscuous wife. There might also have been a perhaps xenophobic association in the Elizabethan or Jacobean mind between mercantile Venice and prostitution or sexual promiscuity, given its clash of the Christian and non-Christian worlds. How are you going to integrate that meaningfully into your close analysis? Actually, in this play, I think it's reasonably decent and easy job to do, so long as you pick the right bits of close AO2 analysis to bring meaningful associations of the contextual period in with that imagery and what it's bringing to mind thematically. If you haven't already done so, then you've left yourself a big job. But even where you have, as I've asked, filled in the chart at the end of Acts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you now need to return to your imagery tracking chart that you added to at the end of each act, I hope, or if not, do so now. Even when you have done it, you now need to go back to it and use it to build a bank of thematically linked or thematically contrasting key quotations mapped onto themes and imagery. I've been over that imagery a couple of slides ago and those themes a couple of slides ago. I won't dwell on repeating that now. Memorize them. Memorize them. Memorize them. You should end up with something like this, a bank of key quotations. I have done this in a very short, sharp, snappy way, and there is no way that what I've done here is enough. It's not exhaustive. Act 1, Scene 1. Iago describes himself as obsequious, excessively obedient, servile, ingratiating, a sycophantic yes-man, a brown-noser, fawning, subservient, submissive, slavish, but in actuality he keeps yet his heart attending on himself. He isn't loyal, he isn't altruistic, he has ulterior motives. Those being jealousy over alleged cuckoldry or ambition over lack of promotion. Rodrigo and Iago use racial slurs such as thick lips and crude animal imagery for lust and sex, the old black ram tupping your white ewe. You'll have your daughter covered with a Barbary horse, you'll have your nephews neigh at you, making the beast with two backs. Iago uses prose when being sexually crude about sexual intercourse, and later when plotting murder. Not necessarily in that particular quotation, just to avoid confusion, but also emphasises the importance of male offspring and heirs from his only daughter. Hence the focus on nephews. Rodrigo describes them more as lascivious, a racist emphasis on lustful excessive libido. Later in Act 1, Scenes 2 and 3, Iago lies about Brabantio's view of Othello. Dramatic irony when Iago refers to Janus, a two-faced Roman god of January, looking back to winter and forward to summer. This dramatic irony makes explicit his duplicity. Brabantio's racist language regarding black witchcraft. Thou hast enchanted her in chains of magic bound, sooty bosom, sans witchcraft, or sans witchcraft, to use the French, to fall in love with what she feared to look on. Othello's self-deprecation, rude am I in my speech, yet defending himself that Desdemona loved his daring do. She loved me for the dangers I had passed. Bringing some critics there who say, like Dollimore does, that Desdemona actually exoticizes the concept of Othello as other. It doesn't have to be a negative or racist thing. It can be actually a kind of positive discrimination, but still a lack of understanding. Othello views Iago as a man of honesty and trust. Brabantio warns Othello that Desdemona has deceived her father and may thee, which foreshadows one of our core themes of suspicion and betrayal. I hate the Moor, says Iago, 'tis thought abroad that twixt my sheets he's done my office. The Moor is of a free and open nature that thinks men honest, but that seem so tenderly led by the nose as asses are. He will be easily led, and I think that he has had an affair with my wife between my sheets. Jealousy. This is more like my approach of a brief synopsis, so please don't think that this is a sufficient list of key quotations. This is not enough for imagery analysis, the swelling sea of hatred, aspics, tongues and poison, all of those little motifs. The swell of my bosom would be a good example later, but we'll come to that, and aspics, tongues, etc. Act 2, Scene 3, Iago says, I'd rather have this tongue cut from my mouth than it should do offence to Michael Cassio. I know, Iago, thy honesty and love doth mince this matter, making it light to Cassio. Reputation is an idle and false imposition, oft got without merit and lost without deserving. Reputation, 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 I have lost my reputation, the immortal part of myself, and what remains is bestial. All of that is core. Our general's wife is now the general. For whiles this honest fool plies Desdemona to repair his fortunes, and she pleads strongly to the Moor, I'll pour this pestilence, this recurring motif of poison, into his ear. Act 3, Scene 3. I like not that. The broken adjacency pairs. You know the drill on that. I'm not going through all of that again now. Why have thy thought, Iago? By heaven, he echoes me. What's it not like? Thou dost conspire against thy friend Iago if thou think'st him wrong and mak'st his ear a stranger to thy thoughts. Good name is the immediate jewel of one's soul. Reputation, as opposed to previously having said the opposite to Cassio, an idle and false imposition. You only think yourself lost if you feel you have lost it. Oh, beware, my lord, of jealousy. 'Tis the green-eyed monster. The cuckold lives in bliss, who, certain of his fate, loves not his wronger. Othello's soliloquy on Iago's exceeding honesty, Amelia's revelation of Iago's desire for the handkerchief. Be sure thou prove my love a whore, give me the ocular proof, or answer my naked wrath. How satisfied, my lord? Grossly gape on, behold her topped. My rage swells like a wave that will never ebb. 'Tis of aspics' tongues, I'm full of poison, I want revenge. There's a key theme that I don't think I listed, but should be in that list, because it's not exhaustive. After Othello and Desdemona's confrontation over the handkerchief, Act 4, Scene 1, Othello and Iago, the double entendres of sex and deceit, of lie, might remind some of us of Handmaids. Iago manipulates Othello to oversee Iago's questioning of Cassio about Bianca when it seems to Othello to be Desdemona. Is Othello stupid? Othello decides to poison Desdemona, strumpet, mistress, goats and monkeys. Scene 2 of Act 4, I'll be hanged if some eternal villain, says Amelia, some busy and insinuating rogue, some cugging, cozening, cheating, deceiving slave hath not devised this slander. Fie, there's no such man, 'tis impossible. If any there such be, heaven pardon him. A halter! Pardon him, and hell gnaw his bone. The contrast of these three characters. A noose. Prose when openly plotting Cassio's murder, foreshadowing in Desdemona's language of shroud, mine eyes do itch, of sorrow and death. She thinks wives to blame if husbands stray into foreign laps, says Amelia. In Act 5, Cassio and Rodrigo and Iago fight and attempt to blame Strumpet Bianca, or at least Iago does. Othello invites Desdemona to pray, so her spirit is prepared, loses his mind whilst killing her, and Iago is led away to be tortured. Torments will ope thy lips. I have done that super rapido, and there's no way that is anything like enough. That is what your A3 grid has been for. You do the work, not me. You have watched a production. You have considered integration of AO3 contexts of writing and reception. You have thought about themes and imagery. You are now going to use those themes to anticipate questions and write questions of your own as a revision and exam practice exercise. Then use your key quotations from the play and Assessment Objective 5 critical interpretations to draft timed responses. If you've not seen the prior episode, episode 8, then you have not considered assessment objective 5. If all you do is look at this examination preparation episode here and leave it at that, you will fail this question. You could do the rest really, really well and still fail if you neglect AO5. And I am giving no advice on it in this episode. So if you're yet to see the last episode, episode 8, on critics, please do, because I spend an extensive amount of time on advice on how to climb the mark scheme scale of engaging with criticism rather than missing it or just merely quoting it. You must not only quote it, but be able to draw out evidence from the play to argue your position amongst these interpretations in an evaluative way. I can't say that really quickly like this, and if it doesn't make sense, you need to go back to that. Neglecting it will be fatal. So do go back to that episode. It's horrendously long because it's got so many examples of critics in it, but you can do it bit by bit in bite-sized chunks and pause as and when you need to. My next slide are some examples of past questions, and then beyond that we'll look at some that I have created myself. I can't remember 2022's questions from this summer, which is ironic because they're the most recent. We did, of course, have a pandemic in which exams didn't run in 2020 and 2021. Since the questions that I've listed here, there has been one on the theme of honour, which I suppose links to trust, betrayal, loyalty, etc. 2019's questions I was thrilled to bits with, because I had written a whole host of questions and practice for the class, one of which was explore Shakespeare's presentation of reputation in Othello, and that was the question that came up. The other option was Emilia, and I had argued that I thought Emilia was an unlikely one, but that any character could come up. I always advise my classes to pick the theme question. Explore Shakespeare's presentation of the theme of reputation in Othello. You must relate your discussion to relevant contextual factors and ideas from your critical reading. Relevant context, relevant ideas from critics. Explore Shakespeare's presentation of Emilia in Othello. You must relate to relevant context and ideas from critical reading. The prior year to that was explore how Shakespeare treats the theme of identity in Othello. You must relate your discussion to relevant contextual factors and ideas from your critical reading. Or explore Shakespeare's presentation of Cassio. The first full A-level in 2016 would have been some A-level question, AS questions. Explore Shakespeare's presentation of the relationship between Othello and Iago in Othello. You must relate your discussion to relevant contextual factors and ideas from your critical reading. Explore how Shakespeare treats the theme of love in Othello. Here was a list that I created long ago for my classes, anticipating possible questions, some of which you'll see actually did come up. I'm pretty good at that, but it's early days, so we can't play that dangerous game. The theme of reputation, relate to context and critics. Identity, context and critics. Jealousy, context and critics. Betrayal, context and critics. Loyalty, race, Desdemona, Rodrigo, Bianca, Othello, Iago, Emilia's happened, Cassio's happened. Doesn't mean they can't again. I recommend themes for juicy analysis rather than characters, but that remains up to you. I've listed on the next couple of slides a whole host of other questions that are not in the Edexcel exam format to get you thinking. It might be that some of them are historic questions from other boards. It might be ones that I've created myself. Remember that Assessment Objective 1 is about your argument, the themes, but also your use of terminology and your cogency, your clarity of argument. AO2, your language analysis of how language shapes meaning, the imagery conveying those themes, the recurring motifs. Context can be social, it can be historical, but it could also be about genre and literary, intertextual context. It can also be about context of reception, which links us to our Assessment Objective 5 critics. Samuel Taylor Coleridge described Iago as a motiveless malignity. What is your view of him as a character in the play, and why do you think he acts as he does? You must relate your discussion to relevant contextual factors and ideas from your critical reading. I am not saying that that is an exam format question, it's not, but it does usefully get you thinking. Is Othello a tragic victim or the engineer of his own fate? You must relate your discussion to relevant contextual factors and ideas from your critical reading. That's pretty much synonymous with how and how far does Shakespeare sustain your sympathy for Othello? You must relate your discussion to relevant contextual factors and ideas from your critical reading. Now, this next one is the sort of technical question that will not come up, but it's useful to equip you for any other question in terms of analysis. Examine the use of imagery, animal, light, dark, any other one of those lists that we've done in the play, to both provide vivid description linking to themes and create a sense of structure by linking motifs. I don't want you to actually necessarily do that, but get thinking about it for preparation. Desdemona is a passive victim of evil forces which she does not understand. How far do you think this is a fair description of her? You must relate your discussion to relevant contextual factors and ideas from your critical reading. Examine the importance of soliloquies. Examine Iago's techniques in Act 3, Scene 3 to persuade Othello of Desdemona's guilt. Don't panic about this question that says the double time scheme. That's more to do with that idea I mentioned briefly of having to suspend one's disbelief about the passage of time in the getting across the sea to Cyprus and the following party overtaking Othello himself. How far do you agree that Othello is a tragedy of two innocents in an unsympathetic world? We learn from Othello not to make an unequal marriage. How far do you agree? How does Shakespeare present race and racism within the play? You must relate your discussion to relevant contextual factors and ideas from your critical reading. I think I've missed a couple there for some reason. How is Othello a play about jealousy, the innate jealousy of Iago and the imposed jealousy of Othello? Of course, these are too wordy, but they're themes to expand upon. Desdemona is a passive victim of evil forces which she does not understand. How far do you think this a fair description of her? Explore Shakespeare's presentation of betrayal, contexts and critics. Explore Shakespeare's presentation of Iago, contexts and critics. Othello, contexts and critics. Desdemona, contexts and critics. Reputation, identity, loyalty, any themes, sympathy, jealousy, racism. Explore Shakespeare's presentation of disturbing aspects of human nature. You must relate your discussion to relevant contextual factors and ideas from your critical reading. Othello states that he was one who loved not wisely, but too well. To what extent do you agree? You must relate your discussion to relevant contextual factors and ideas from your critical reading. F.R. Leavis describes Othello as egotistical. To what extent do you agree? Contexts, critics. Give me the ocular proof. Explore Shakespeare's presentation of a compulsive desire to see. I think I've created that question. I'm not sure. I can't remember. Contexts, critics. Shakespeare presents Iago as a misogynist. To what extent do you agree? Contexts, critics. I like these to what extent do you agrees. That won't be the format of your question if you're doing Edexcel, but it does lead you to argue a more nuanced, refined argument. Shakespeare presents Iago as a pornographer. That's me having maybe going a little bit too undergraduate level. I can't see that coming up. Iago is an emotional vandal, torturing several characters with concepts of reputation. I've made this one up. To what extent do you agree? Iago's question marks are a hook to capture a victim. Examine his dialogues and the techniques he uses to deceive. Too wordy and too hard. But all of these are designed to get you thinking. It only remains for me to wish you luck in your exams, but as I say to students every year, I am reluctant to wish students luck because it should not be about fate, fortune or luck. You know if you have put 100% effort into your preparation. If I will leave you with one bit of advice here today, a really good response integrates all of the assessment objectives as much as possible at the same time. Thematic argument, close imagery analysis, connected with context and critics. Please take this opportunity to hit like and subscribe if you've not done so already. Please, as with any point in this course, whether it be close analysis of an act or scene, whether it be last time's episode, which is linked here on other critical interpretations, you can drop me comments or questions in the comments below. Looking forward to next episode, we will be looking at some student examples of exam responses. Adieu for now, and I will see you for our final episode next time. Don't panic about the wording of these questions on this last slide. They are too wordy and they are too hard. It's just designed to get you thinking. Over preparation, putting 100% in, means that whatever grade you get at the end, you can be satisfied that it was the best possible outcome. Don't cut any corners at this point. See you next time for some examples from students.